So to make a long story short, the year we implemented it and went all in, we won our first national championship. And it wasn't that we had the best team we've ever had. They just went to another level, because when we came to those moments where fear had paralyzed us in the past, it no longer was paralyzing us. It allowed us to go to another level.
This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, where we explore how to forge mental toughness and resilience in every aspect of life. Welcome, I'm your host, Coach Thomann. I'm an ICF certified professional coach with a background as a teacher, basketball coach, and athletic director. But my journey took a dramatic turn in 2020 when I survived both cancer and a stroke. Those experiences shaped my mission, help others grow stronger in every facet of life. Today, I work with athletes, coaches, educators, and anyone who believes that positive mental health is both achievable and a personal responsibility. This podcast is dedicated to helping listeners develop a positive version of toughness, one rooted in resilience, focus, and growth. Whether you're looking to excel on the field, in the classroom, or in life, this is your space to learn, grow, and take action. Join me on this journey, and together, let's forge your mettle. I'm going to jump right into this and give you some information about my guest today because I don't want to lose anyone. My guest today, I'm going to read you some of the stats from his coaching and a little bit from his playing career. So my guest today has 3 NAIA national championships in men's basketball. He's coached 27, that's 27, NAIA All-Americans. In his conference, he's won 13 regular season championships and 5 league tournament championships. He has coached the NAIA National Player of the Year twice, and one time this individual was the Small College Player of the Year. This coach is also the youngest coach in collegiate history, regardless of the level, the youngest coach ever to reach 500 wins. And he did that in 629 games, which means he won 500 wins. His record for that stretch was 500 wins and 129 losses. He also played 4 years at Valparaiso, led them to 4 NCAA tournament appearances. Greg Tonagel is phenomenal, and this interview is fantastic. I got to know Greg because he is the head coach at Indiana Wesleyan University, and amazingly, my connection there is because my sister, Allie Williams, used to be at Indiana Wesleyan University. She's now moved on, bigger and better, but she was on the search committee that hired Greg Tonagel, which I think is pretty cool. And not only is Greg unbelievably successful as a basketball coach, he is also, this is very minor in his book, but it's big for me, I think this might be one of the most impactful interviews I've ever done. And the reason is Greg Tonagel is the youngest coach to get 500 wins, collegiate level, and he coaches exactly the way I try to get coaches to coach. In this interview, he and I are on the same page on almost everything. When I talk about doing my Ember to Inferno program, and I mention it in here in this interview, and I did it this morning working with some coaches, and the positivity and leaning into positivity and getting away from fear and getting away from negativity and coaching in that way, and how I promise that it is not only better for the athlete, but it is better for your win and loss record over time, that it is the way you should be coaching. Greg Tonagel does all of these things, and there are so many things that he's doing that just mirror everything I'm talking about. And it's not surprising. Greg has a doctorate in transformational leadership. So when he talks about coaching, There's a lot of talk about there about if you're a transactional coach or a transformational coach. And Greg Tonagel is the epitome of a transformational coach. And he's also one of the most successful coaches ever at a collegiate level. And that to me is unbelievably cool. And I cannot wait for you to dive into this interview and get to meet Greg Tonagel and hear what he has to say. Please, if you are a coach of any sport and you are listening to this, get your notepad out and take some notes. It's not coming from me. It's from a guy who wins a lot of games and has a lot of success. So please pay attention and enjoy this interview with Indiana Wesleyan University's Greg Tonagel. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness, using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching. All right, welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm here with my guest today, Greg Tonagel, the head coach of the Indiana Wesleyan Wildcats. And Coach, I'm so happy. I've been talking a little bit back and forth. Excited to finally have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to connect and have a good conversation and learn a little bit today.
Well, I hope so. That's one of my favorite parts about doing this show is connecting with so many different coaches, and I learn stuff from them, and hopefully I can hopefully you have. I mean, if you come into it thinking you're going to learn something from me, you're already my kind of guy, because I find every conversation with anybody is something. I'm always looking for something, and usually you can usually find it if you look for it.
Yep, absolutely.
So a little bit of background here. You're a basketball coach, and we're going to get into your pedigree a little bit and some of the success you've had. But what really got me excited, Coach, is when I look at your educational resume here and just some of the education you have. You've got a doctorate in transformational leadership, right? And I can't tell you, like, I've had a lot of basketball coaches on, a lot of them talk about transformation, but I've never had one that had a doctorate in transformational leadership. And when I look at some of the other degrees that you have, practical theology, and then a master in arts, teaching, and learning, I can't, to me, yes, you have to know basketball, you have to know your sport, you have to do this, but I think it's secondary to the transformation, the culture, and all that, because the X's and O's just don't matter if you don't have the other.
Mm-hmm. Man, you're getting me fired up right now. I think I told somebody this though. When you get a doctorate, you realize what you don't know. I'm like, I know nothing. I better go find another degree, because I think all my professors just showed me how little I know. But that's kind of the exciting part, right? There's always another door to open, and yeah, I mean, to then, I mean, we can get into this. I don't know if you want to now, but to take that and apply it to coaching was one of the most enjoyable journeys I've been on, because I'd walk out of a theology class and say, okay, how does this apply to my team? Or I'd walk out of a theory of personal growth, and I'd say, well, how does this apply to preseason? And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I mean, I think coaches are always doing that. The question is, do you have the toolbox to be able to do it?
Well, I think good coaches are doing that. I think that coaches that struggle are also the ones that never apply new ideas to stuff,
Mm.
and are, or think they already have it all figured out, and that exists still sometimes. But what I want to bring up here to my audience who may not know you is when we talk about you have this degree in transformational leadership and you've got these degrees in teaching and learning, and you're talking about the importance of transformational leadership. I'm going to brag here on you a little bit, Coach. You do this, and you are also the youngest coach in collegiate history to reach 500 wins. So it's not like you're not also successful doing this, because we know people like that talk about all this but may not be successful. You're beyond successful. Like, you're applying this, and it's really useful for you. You got 500 wins. What I see here, you won 500 wins, and it took you 629 games to get there. That's nuts. Like, you can appreciate that. That's nuts.
I'm still wondering about the 129. What happened to those games? But seriously, those are the ones that keep you up at night.
Well, let's hopefully they don't keep you up too much. But no, I know that I can tell. I'm sure that you're a humble guy and you're not wanting to dive into this too much. But I have to set some bona fides here that when we're talking about this stuff, and I have to put it out there that you're doing this and it's successful. And I will not skip by that, because I think that it's an important part of it.
Yeah, it is, and I'll be honest with you. I'm a believer, and I believe, and it's my foundation, is God's way is the best way. Now, when I talk coaching philosophy, I tend to look first, what does God have to say about coaching philosophy? What does his word say? And then I try to apply that. And it's not prosperity gospel. It doesn't mean if I do this, my team's going to win. I just think he's designed us and he's designed people to operate in a specific way. And so my job as a coach is to align people with his purposes. And I think when you do that in basketball, it's just my theory, they become better basketball players. It sounds simple, but when you help a kid play, like for instance, if a player plays in joy, I think he plays better.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all know that, but why do so many coaches cuss their players out, walk in with a negative attitude, if you really believe that, right? There's a disconnect between what we say we believe and what we actually do. So I think trying to just apply some of these common sense principles, I think you'd be surprised how well they work.
I got into late in life that I got into this career that I'm in now, and I'm a certified coach, positive psychology, got into all this stuff and started learning about this. And then I did kind of what you do. I started looking at what's the biblical perspective of this. And it's amazing to me how often a lot of the stuff that psychologists and positive psychologists and figure it out, that it's already there's already biblical truth behind that. I mean, when Paul talks about faith, hope, and love, and everybody, it's the Bible, it's the wedding verse, right? But he's not talking about a wedding. He's talking about how we should do everything. And so when you're talking about playing in joy, there's biblical truth for that, and there's positive psychology believes in that, but again, coaches don't always do that, and it's frustrating.
I think it's easy in coaching. You get wrapped up in the minutia and the details, and it's always, what do I got to do next? And sometimes you just got to sit back and just, what do my guys need? Sometimes they don't need a new play. I think about this in basketball a lot. We lose a game, and your mind immediately goes to, well, it's our defense. What scheme, aren't we doing? And sometimes that's true, but there's sometimes where it's like, what's in their minds? Are they fearless right now? Or are they afraid? Are they seeking validation where they shouldn't? Are they wondering where they stand with me? All that stuff gets in the mind, and a new play, a new drill, a new scheme doesn't take that out of the mind. So, you hear this a lot in coaching. Oh, I'm a counselor, I'm a psychologist. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why coaches should be equipping themselves. I mean, you do such a great job of equipping coaches. They should be just spoon feeding this stuff, as opposed to just the next best play or drill or whatever.
Well, I think that, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I mean, you grew up in Indiana, right? Playing basketball. Yep. And I don't know how you were coached when you were younger, but a lot of us weren't coached that way. So as coaches, we begin coaching the way we were coached. So, I mean, what was it like? I mean, how were you coached when you were younger? And I know you ended up playing and you played at Valparaiso and stuff. And I'm just curious, you had to have been coached the wrong way some too. Not all the right way.
No, absolutely. I mean, you said it. When I grew up in Indiana in the mid '90s, Bob Knight was the greatest coach in all of
Oh,
college basketball, right? And Bob Knight, as good as he was, still had some flaws in that fear was the way that he motivated. And so,
mhm,
you know, in coaching, it's a copycat sport. So everybody thought, especially in the state of
mhm,
Indiana, well, if I just scare the bejeebies out of my team, they're going to play well. And that worked for some time, but there's been a shift, right? There's been a shift in kids' mentality, parents' mentality. Fear no longer is the great motivator. What I say is fear is the great paralyzer. I mean, you come in with that mentality now, and all you're doing is paralyzing. You're putting a ceiling on who the team can become. And so no longer, and I did that to myself. You know, I said, man, I want to be like Bob Knight. So I coached myself out of fear. I used to get up at 5 a.m. to shoot in the mornings because I didn't want somebody passing me. That's a good motivator until you experience burnout, right? You can't be just worried about if I don't do this, this is what's going to happen to me. And a lot of that formed and shaped my philosophy because when I first got into coaching, I'm a young 25-year-old coach and I'm using fear to motivate my players. And I'm seeing some results, but there's also a lid on who we could become. And it wasn't until I made
mhm.
this flip where we said, what if we took fear out of the game? And there's a million ways to take fear out of the game. And I'm always paying attention to that. How do I remove fear? If I can remove fear, I raise the level of potential, I raise the level of joy, and all of a sudden I have a completely new player and a completely new team. And to me, that's the fun in coaching is being able to figure that out each and every year.
I'm just now I'm excited, Coach, because you're speaking. This is the sort of thing. Like I worked with some coaches this morning, and and I was trying to talk about this. And it's not that coaches are resistant to it, but some are resistant to it, right? But just like you can coach and elicit a fight or flight response, and
Mhm.
that's what the fear does, right? And but there's three things: fight, flight, or freeze. So when you hear paralyzing, that's what I feel. Like a lot of kids just freeze and they don't know what to do because they don't want to make a mistake, so they don't do anything, and that's not what we want. The flight kids never even make it to your program, right, at a college level because they just can't handle it all, but probably because they got it beaten out of them when they were younger, right? Um, but the thing is, but the fight kids, and those are the kids we think we want, right? The kids that under pressure in fight or flight do the fight. And the problem is you can get results that way, but it also has some long-term consequences for the individual. And that's what it's not worth it. Cause I mean, Bobby Knight was militaristic, very much so. Right. And they teach like that in the military because it's life or death. And as much as we don't want to say it in Indiana and Illinois, basketball is not life or death. Right. So I just love that so much you said right there was stuff that like I'm just saying that to coaches this morning working on it. And I love that that's your thought about is getting fear out of there and coaching with more hope. Now, was there a time that you felt like a turning point that you're like, how did you make that decision?
Yeah, so in 2013, we went to our fourth Elite Eight in 5 years. And when you go to your first Elite Eight, everybody congratulates you. And you go to your second one, there's still some excitement. But by your third and fourth, they start asking questions like, why can't you
Like,
get to a Final Four, right? And, in coaching, that's a little bit of a standard, mark along the journey. And I remember questioning myself after that fourth one, saying, what is it? Like, why do we get to this point and we can't go further? And our staff spent a lot of time praying. I was searching, and the word fearless kept popping up. And now this was before fearless was really popular. Taylor Swift hadn't sung about it yet. There wasn't a book on it. And so it wasn't as common, but I was like, man, what is this word about? So I challenged our staff to spend several months. This was in May, June, and even July. I said, just like, let's just pray and let's read. And you wouldn't believe how often we were coming across the concept of fear. And namely this, and I'll share this. If you package up the different topics of things that Jesus talked about in the New Testament, fear is the number one topic that he addressed.
mm,
I would have thought it was love, serving, money, you name it, not fear. So that immediately caught our attention as here's the greatest leader of all time. He knows something about people's potential, and yet he's telling us fear is not a good thing. And so we started really paying attention into it. So then the next step was, okay, how do we apply this? One of the things I realized was as a coach, I often project fears onto my players. So in big
Mm-hmm.
moments, big games, what do? I worry. I worry our defense isn't going to be good enough. I worry that my scout's not going to be thorough enough. So I'm fearful that I'm letting everybody down. So what do? I then press that upon other people. I'm frustrated. I'm short. I give them scouting reports that are like 10 pages long, and all I'm doing is paralyzing them. I think I'm raising the level in the room. I'm actually lowering the level in the room. So like we kind of went through a complete overhaul and said, hey, the way we talk about shots, no longer do you in a film session just show them all the bad shots. I used to love to do that. Here's all the bad shots you
Yep.
took. Well, guess what they're doing every time they take a good shot? They're thinking, am I going to get yelled at? What's coach going to do? And along the way, I'll say this, there's always that balance of, does that mean we have no discipline? No, I actually think you have more discipline as you teach this, right, in a biblical way. You're not just saying it's a free-for-all, everybody just go do whatever you want. We're just looking at this whole idea of removing fear from the game as opposed to putting it in. So to make a long story short, the year we implemented it and went all in, we won our first national championship. And it wasn't that we had the best team we've ever had. They just went to another level because when we came to those moments where fear had paralyzed us in the past, it no longer was paralyzing us. It allowed us to go to another level. And that was 2014. And, we've never looked back in terms of growing and learning how to implement this fearless mentality. Because to me, it's just a fun way to coach and play.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. It is like there's some worry and there's some consternation about changing the way you coach. But honestly, like I'm feeling from you right now, like coaching can be it's a tough profession, right? It can work on you quite a bit as the coach. How does it change like how you feel and how you go home coaching this way versus the other way?
100%. Like I said, it starts with the coach. And I think most coaches are control freaks. And I say that's what makes us good. We can control so many variables, but at the same time, those variables begin controlling us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're not operating in what I would just say freedom. I should be able to go home after a bad practice or even a tough loss and be able to engage my family in a loving way, be present. But so often when I'm not, it's because I'm fearful of validation. I'm fearful of approval. All these things are self-centered. It's all me drawing back to myself. And as I'm able to get out of that and I'm able to understand where my validation comes from and where my true success comes from, I can let go of those fears and I can live life differently. That you mentioned coaching. There's no other job that dominates your time and attention more than coaching, right? You're never off. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about your team. You're on the weekends, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so I'm encouraged as I talk to coaches who are implementing fearless and letting go of all this control that they can enjoy their lives. We don't have to live so stressed out all the time because we are. Coaching is a very stressful gig.
No, it is. I like, and it doesn't have to be even at your level. I had a good friend of mine, and he managed road constructions during the day, multi-million-dollar projects, and then he would go coach like junior high or JV, and he eventually got into high school girls basketball. And he was like, all these projects I would do, millions of dollars and all these deadlines, none of that kept me up at night. But worrying about worrying about the scout for a game that's going to have 50 people in the stands, he goes, that's what kept me up. And you're right. And I think it's a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's because on the other side, Coach, I think that coaches have an enormous responsibility when we're talking about the right way to coach and how it affects players. It's the Spider-Man line, like with great power comes great responsibility, because a coach they are in the place that they can make a kid's life worse or better just on how they want to show up every day. And that's in a young individual's life. That's powerful.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, you look at coaching and time, intensity, and influence. No other position, in our society has such an opportunity. And that's why so many people, if I have a graduate assistant opening, there's 100 applicants. It's like, you want to work for free for a full year? Like, I just want to get into coaching, because there's on the other end, there's purpose, right? When that purpose
Yes.
is realized, then you can't calculate that in a paycheck. And it's so valuable to find that purpose and do it for something greater than just success.
Your athlete probably spends hours working on the specific skill set they need for their sport. And they probably spend hours in the weight room building their body. But how much time do they spend intentionally training their mind? Well, building mindset is the key to bridging the gap between the skills that we see and game execution. Well, Mental Mettle Coaching provides individual programs that can help your athlete develop this third and crucial skill set. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Yeah. So talk to me about when you talk about changing the way you coach and coaching more fearless and doing that. I want to talk about some practical stuff. Like, how does it change a daily practice plan, or like before and after? How does a practice look different? How does a Coach Tonagel practice look different once you make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, some practical things. I think it starts one with how you're using film. Film is a great tool to show our players, and some of it's how we're wired. I'm wired to point out the 10 mistakes you made before I say anything positive. It's just I recognize that.
So I'm gonna interrupt here real quick. It's not so. I love getting in the research on this. It's not just you. It's the human nature. So when you talk about Jesus talking about fear, and he wrote about it that so much, and about finding out the negatives, we're hardwired for that. We're hardwired for that, and it's like all the research shows that. So it's like finding positives instead of in front of negatives is hard. That takes effort to do it. So I'm agreeing with you. Sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to say that because that's like, it's not just you. I think most coaches do that and most humans do that.
Well, I needed to hear that because I beat myself up, for being pretty critical, but I'm self-critical. So I think it starts there as I'm showing you film, not just showing you the good or the bad behavior, because it's easy to say, hey, Matt, you missed 5 shots. Let me show you those 5 shots. But as opposed to like, how do you fit into the big picture of what we're doing and how are you growing? To me, that's one of the biggest things as we meet, and it's going to be regular. I can't just meet with you once and get my point across, but how am I helping you identify your growth into this team? So say I need you to grow into a better decision maker. I got to show you some good plays. I got to show you where you were 2 months ago. I got to be able to like show you. We use this imagery. We call it the line. And what we say about the line is there's 2 things that are important. One is be honest about where you're at. So I don't care where you're at. You may be a bad decision maker, but just self-aware of where you're at and then be willing to move forward. If you're willing to do those 2 things, that's how we drive behavior. As opposed to what a lot of us do is we form a box and we say, you're either in or out of the box. So a good shot means you're in my box. A bad shot means you're out. Well, the problem is you're always gauging and judging yourself, whether you're in or out. And sometimes you don't know where you stand with me. As opposed to if I can get you to mentally imagine this line and I say, Matt, I don't care where you're at on the line, but be honest about it and be willing to move forward. As a team, we all can move forward because there's going to be some people in front of you, some people behind you. And so if I can kind of overlay that mentality and perspective as we go into practice and we go into game film, I'm constantly helping you move forward as opposed to like, hey, you're not in my box right now and you're second guessing where you're at.
So the idea behind, I see everything from transformational there when you're talking about that's the idea of transformation, and the idea behind professional coaching. And what I do is it's all about getting somebody to recognize their A and figure out what their B is and find that. So when you talk the line, that's, as a coach, that's what I do. We find out where you are. And sometimes that's tough, but we don't want it to be like, it doesn't have to be negative, but it's just real. Like, we don't have to take judgment away from it. Like, here's the fact, right? Here's the facts where I am, but that doesn't mean I can't be somewhere else. And we start moving towards it. Your idea of imagery to do that, again, I love that, because it's metaphorical imagery really helps kids to do that. So I'm geeking out about this stuff, because you're saying everything that these are exactly the sort of things that I'm preaching to try to do, that kids, like, we have these, they put labels on themselves, and the coaches put labels on them, right? And they just become, well, this is what happens when I do this, or this happens when I do this. So when they get that cue, they already have the response, not what could I be in the face of that adversity, instead of, oh, this is what I always do. And if you don't,
let me give you another example of that.
Yeah.
We do this all the time. How often do we split our players into, like, he's a shooter, he's a non-shooter? And granted, the kid may be a 30% 3-point shooter, and you don't want him taking threes, but if he's not on the line, he'll never get there. So I think it's like, hey, where are you at? I'm a 30% shooter. Okay. If you put in X amount of shots per day, I bet you can get to 32 in a couple months. I'm at least giving them a path forward, as opposed to what we do a lot of times is, well, you're a non-shooter, don't shoot the ball, just go set screens. I'm not sure you're going to get the most out of that kid. It's the same thing defensively. We kind of, in our head, we go, man, I've got a bunch of non-defenders. Now, the only thing that makes you a non-defender in my mind is if you're unwilling to give effort. If you're giving effort, you're on the line, you're willing to move forward. And over time, what happens is people then grow, people then improve. And that's what we want as coaches. Everybody's going to improve and grow at a different rate, but our job is to move them forward on that line. But first off, we got to put them on the line as opposed to the box.
Well, you have to let them know that that's a possibility, because I think a lot of people think it's not possible. They have these limiting beliefs about themselves, about what they are. And then if you have a limiting belief, like your limiting belief is, I'm not a good defender. And then you go into film and the coach shows you reasons why you're not a good defender. And then all you're doing is just staying in that cycle, and you're solidifying that idea. And guess what? You're never going to be a good defender. You have to start with the thought that you can become something before you actually become it. Yep. Like it has to be part of it. And people don't do that enough, and coaches don't allow that to happen sometimes.
Definitely.
So how do you notice your players respond to this sort of coaching? Like, when maybe I don't know, maybe you look for what you look for in a recruit, or do you know that we can develop this sort of mindset out of a kid? Because I guarantee they're not all coming to you like this.
No, and I think that's the hardest part. I wish I could tell you, man, you can identify this in kids, and it's not easily identifiable. Secular, I guess, psychology would simplify this into growth mindset, right? There's some elements of this where they'd say, find kids that have growth elements. And there's enough resources out there that can help you as you're talking and dialoguing to kids. Hey, tell me about your worst practice and how did you respond? Or, if I told you that you were going to go 0 for 10 tomorrow night, tell me what you'd be doing the next day. And, what you're looking for is resiliency. What you're looking for is kids who say, I'm going to get back in the gym and work my butt off. What you're not looking for is excuses. So there's a little bit of, like, in dialogue, you can figure some of this out. But then I also think you got to be able to see a kid on his worst day. When I ask film from a high school coach, like, send me his best game, but send me his worst game. And I want to see his worst game because I want to know how he's responding and where's his mindset at. Because most of my recruiting mistakes have been when I have chosen talent over mindset. Because you can easily identify talent. He's 6'6", he's long, he's athletic. Great. But is he tough? Is he mentally tough? And I've made the mistake of choosing that kid over the 6-foot unathletic kid who's tough as nails. I won't make that mistake again. I'm just valuing toughness and competitiveness way more, because at the end of the day, that wins you basketball games.
Yes, 100%. But what I'm curious about is, how well are you able to develop that? The way you're coaching, theoretically, should be able to start helping kids move towards that. And I'm just
Hmm.
curious how much you see that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you, yeah, we measure it and I can give you some good data on it. But I think one of the ways is just when you have meetings each and every year, we help our guys identify the it's a scale. Here's where you're at, and there's a bunch of different areas, and then we ask for their input. I see you here in this area. You tell me. And I think one of the things young people lack is self-awareness. Where are they at? Who are they right now? And sometimes it's because we don't ask them. So to be able to ask
Right.
them, hey, tell me what's going on inside your heart and your mind. A lot of them don't know. And I'll tell you why they don't know. Because they have a phone that if they're ever confused, they just distract themselves. So rather than face, being uncomfortable or face feelings, they just drown themselves in distraction. So part of, I think, our strategy in helping people grow is like, I got to give you life skills of figuring out, why are you anxious right now? Why are you frustrated right now? And then how do you deal with that? Because when you talk transformation, big picture, you're going to be a man who's going to enter into society and maybe even get married, maybe have a family. Like, do you have the tools to deal with how tough life's going to be? And that's what we want to be able to produce in them. And so I definitely know we see growth over time. We hear it a lot. My favorite thing is when you get a note from a player that says, "Man, this place changed my life." Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's the coaching paycheck you want. And you can't deny somebody's testimony, although it's not measured, in objective data.
No.
What they're telling you is, in a firsthand experience, man, this place changed my life. And to me, that's pretty special.
Well, and I think that I can tell you this, when you talk about deciding not to coach out of fear, when you do coach using fear, I think that's the other thing. You might be thinking you're creating tough individuals, but you're also creating individuals that will parent out of fear, that will be husbands or spouses out of fear, bosses that use fear because
Yeah.
that's what they know, right? So you don't, the fact that you are in a power position as a coach, you're being successful and you're using that mindset instead of fear, I can tell you that you're making an enormous difference because they're not seeing that example, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's an issue. I think that's an issue in a lot of athletes coming out, and that's how they. Well, there's a lot, especially when we talk. I don't want to get too deep here, but there's a lot of guys, a lot of men, especially that come out of that are good athletes and do stuff, and they don't have the purpose, and they were coached that way out of fear, and they really struggle mentally in adulthood. And that, I think that's what we should be scared of more than wins and
Mhm.
losses as coaches.
Yeah, when you think about the responsibility, we have. I mean, if you think about some of the things you remember that your coach said to you 30 years ago, it's like mind-boggling. I can't remember what I ate for
Yes.
breakfast this
No.
morning, but there was a coach who said something to me in the heat of the moment 30 years ago that I still remember, that stings. And I think, man, I've been that guy. I've said some demeaning things, and I've said stuff out of anger that I cannot get back, and I
Yeah,
don't want to be that any longer. And uh, I think we just need to take more seriously our words and the position of power that we hold as coaches, because our players can carry that stuff for the rest of their lives. I know I've
they
messed up
do.
far too many times.
They do. They do. We all do. Every athlete knows that, right? Um, Talk to me about your slogan, or I don't know, whatever you call it, about your pursuit of three, because I know that's a big part of your program. And I don't really understand what it is. I didn't dive into it too much because honestly, I was excited to have you explain it to me.
So it's called I'm Third, and it's the culture, the heartbeat, it's the foundation of who we are. It's God first, others second, self third. And it seems simple, but it's very counterintuitive and it's very countercultural. Our culture says me first, whatever else second. Like the world's just built upon this platform of get yours, look out for yourself, fill your needs, and you'll be a happy, successful person. But I think anybody that's gone down that path, and anytime I've just looked out for my own self, and I've gathered for myself, and I've used people for my benefit, I've found I've not been very happy or fulfilled or even successful. And
Yeah.
here's the cool thing, we talked a lot about fearless. 1 John 4:18 says, "Perfect love drives out all fear." And this was kind of
Mm.
a huge moment for me in coaching when I made that connection, because I was like, how do I become more of a fearless coach? How do I get rid of fear? And I read, "Perfect love drives out all fear." So if I become somebody who aligns my life in a way that puts God first and others second, meaning I learn God's love for me, I learn to love other people, then the fear is driven out of my life. And so the two are intermixed and they're mingled. As I become fearless, I learn to love God and others. As I learn to love God and others, fear is driven out of my life. And so, both of those have become foundational pillars for our program. Because, man, I don't want to get too preachy on here, so just cut me
No,
off if you think it's too.
I want you to trust. That was where I was going next. So I want you to go preachy on me. How about that?
Think about how many of your fears are self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to me? What do others think of me? Like there's just there's self-centeredness to a lot of our fears. And as I understand God's love for me, and as I understand the gospel's this: I am validated, therefore I can perform. The world is, you must perform in order to become validated. And so a
Yeah.
lot of us spend most of our lives seeking this validation, and it never comes. I win a national championship and I want another one. I make my first million. It's not enough. I get a lot of followers, and all of a sudden I compare myself to somebody else. So once I can live into this God first and others second, I'm validated, I'm accepted, therefore I go and perform. And I'm free to perform without any strings attached to it. And so much of, my philosophy comes back to, obviously it's rooted in the gospel. It's rooted in putting God first, putting other people second.
I love it. I think the idea of the validation first really helps with some of the stuff that I work with athletes and how they can be so engrossed in the negative self-talk that they have and beating themselves up. And honestly, that comes from sometimes the way they were coached, right? And they have this negative self-talk about themselves. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I can't whatever. And we got to remember that God validates us, and there, that's the validation we need. Everything else is secondary, right? And he doesn't, there's no part of it in the scripture that he wants us to beat ourselves up and hate ourselves. And it's get rid of that fear and lean into the love. And I'm telling you, like, when I talk about transformation and being transformational, it's why I love reading all the books of Paul, because he is, to me, he is the GOAT of transformation. Like from what he became, what he was to what he became. And I just love reading all of his stuff and the way he does it. And again, I think there's so many parallels between what he writes and a lot of, as you said, the secular stuff on mindset and stuff like this. Paul talks about this stuff. He just doesn't know. He didn't know what those terms were, right? He never read Carol Dweck's Mindset or anything like that. But that doesn't mean it's not biblical and it's not God-based. And I just love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you continue to, it's a curious question. What do you continue to work on and get better at and grow in your program? Because you're doing really well, but I can also hear in you that you're constantly looking to tweak stuff and get better. Like, what is it you're trying to grow and get better at?
Well, I was just talking to one of my assistants this morning about this. I would say the last couple of years, there's a challenge for me to regain our culture and our identity. We had it on autopilot for a while, and then you recruit somebody who doesn't fit. All it takes is one guy, and I've just been really enthused. I've been encouraged. Man, I got to get back and really set the standard. I met with our team on Saturday and tried my best to inspire and motivate and say, guys, this is the standard and expectation. I don't expect you to be perfect, but man, we're raising the bar. And who we are as men, the way we conduct ourselves, all the way down to the language we're going to use, when things don't go our way. And that's what I'm working on. I mean, in some ways, I'll be honest with you, this is year 21. I feel like it's year one. And that excites me because I don't ever want to be the coach that's just like, this is just another season. Here's the template, plug and play. It's like every year is figuring out what's the personal identity of this team. Where do we need to go? What's the vision and how do we get them there? And that takes a lot of time and intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And I would probably say in year 21, I'm putting more time and intentionality into that right now.
The word intentionality is one of my favorite words. I think that whatever we are intentional about, we grow in. And if you aren't putting purposeful, intentional work into something, you're not getting better at it. And I think we skip it. We talk about it, we give it, but we don't actually do a lot of the things. When you talk about this stuff and doing all this stuff, where your focus or like where you spend your time and your effort, X's and O's or culture stuff, where's it split?
Man, I'm very much a culture guy. I need to get better at the X's and O's, but I also have a great staff who I can hire, who I have hired, who is better than me and has done a great job at that. But my mind first goes to it's people. I always say this: every coach needs to have the emergency button you hit when things get tough. And for me, when I'm confused or when I'm angry, when I'm frustrated, or if I don't know where this team needs to go, I just ask myself two questions. How do I unify hearts? How do I create fearless minds? So we come out of a 3-game losing streak, and rather than immediately go to what next drill do I need, what next practice plan, I go, where's the unity on this team? Because often you'll find it there, right? We're not getting along, attitude. But then the other thing is, how do I create fearless minds? What is not allowing us to play fearless? And I start there. And ultimately, I have to build that out to be very practical. And it may show itself in a new drill. It may show itself in a new, scheme. But I don't start with the scheme. I start with those two foundational pieces, and I'm trying to grow in that. And for me, I'm not a huge reader. I read every day. I just read scripture, and I'm just asking the question too: how do I unify hearts, and how do I create fearless minds? Like, what does scripture say about those things? And I'm trying to apply that to the context of my team. And I think you'd be amazed if you just stop and ask the question, God, speak to me today. You'd be surprised how the word will come alive and you could apply it to your players. And when you give them that, you're giving them something that's life-giving. It's not just another motivational tweet that they're going to be like, oh, this is awesome, and then they forget it. Mm-hmm. You're giving them something that is actually speaking into their context and their life at that moment. And to me, that's discipleship and coaching.
I think where we lose some coaches, where it gets difficult, because again, I'm reminded of the fact that you have a doctorate in transformational leadership, right? So when you ask those questions, and even if you start to figure it out, you're like, hey, we're not unified hearts here, or we're not having fearless leader or fearless players here. It's the next step on how do you identify that, and then how do you coach that, right? And because that's X's and O's are easy because we need to work on this. And I think that's why they default to that, is because, I can do a drill here to get better at this, and that'll help me win a game, or maybe not. But how do you determine what's the next step, and how do you coach that?
Well, the hottest thing right now in sports, and especially basketball, is analytics. It's you can have all the advanced stats in the world that you could give me a 10-page mock-up after a game. And if you don't tell me, is my team touching? Are they encouraging? Are they smiling? You've told me nothing about how I think I can improve a team. Like I'd rather have you say, hey, Greg, every time a kid came off the floor, your team never stood up the bench and touched him. That tells me more about our problems, why we're not shooting the ball well. We're not together, And so I think paying attention to those things, yes, we utilize analytics, but to me, it cannot be the lead. It can't be the thing we start with. It has to be all these unquantifiable things: touches, smiles, togetherness. You don't build those over a week. You build those over a year. It's part of your culture. And when you have it, you've got something special, but you have to maintain and you got to pay attention to those things.
When you talk about it not being quantifiable, do you ever try to make it quantifiable? Like whenever it's down and you're like, hey, this is like, I need more smiles. I need more touches. I need this. Like, do you ever like,
It's funny you say that because my assistant coach, Caleb Mathia, did his master's thesis or project on this very subject, and it was had to do with the number of times players touched and their performance. And Steve Nash was like the standard
yeah,
for that. Steve Nash touched everybody. He's always patting people. And I forget the stats, but he showed them to our guys one time and just said, when you touch this many times, your production goes up. And the guys were like, because it's the human element,
yeah,
right? It's
it
like,
is.
it's just like your kids. Like when I go home, if I touch my kids and hug my kids, we have a better chance of having a better evening and a better
Yeah,
dinner, as
absolutely.
opposed to coming home and yelling about the garbage and yelling about the dirty rooms and whatnot. So there is some of that is quantifiable. You know, I wish I had a staff to do it. If I ever had $1 million staff like some of these guys had, I don't think I'd be asking for shooting percentages. I'd be asking for touch, facial
Yeah.
expressions, eye contact, all this unquantifiable stuff, and make it quantifiable.
Yeah. Oh, I would so be excited about that. In my mind, I'm like, hey, I think I need you to connect me with that grad student that did that thesis, because that's like, I could talk about that stuff all day because I think it's real. I think because we have to take what I think when we talk about touches and smiles and stuff like this, it seems unquantifiable, but I think it's quantifiable, and I think it's something that you can coach and you can create. And I still think it's going to give you more results than the other stuff. The kids have the ability. You are recruiting kids that can already put a ball in a hoop. You just do, right? It's your job to do the other, and I think it's fantastic. All right, Coach, we're running short on time here, so the last question I always ask my guest is, what is the question I didn't ask you that I should have?
Man, that's a tough one. You put me on the spot on that.
It's on purpose, man. I don't want anybody to leave being a guest on my podcast and think I didn't get a chance to talk about this. So that's it right there. What's the question I didn't ask you that I should have?
You know, I think I'd love to talk a little bit about how to get away from coaching in basketball.
Okay.
You know, for me, I'm a big hunter and fisherman. And
oh man,
then
we're not getting off this podcast anytime soon here, man. Let's go. Go ahead to it. Yeah.
It's a mental reset. You know, I think some guys like golf, some guys, you know, you got to have something outside of coaching because as we talk about, it consumes you. So, man, if you let me go fishing for a day or hunting for a day, it's a mental reset. I come back refreshed. I come back ready to coach. So I love the outdoors, just a big outdoors fan.
That's awesome. And I think it's good because you probably think about it a little bit out there, but you also, you know, I don't know. It's not pressure. It's just, you know what I mean? It's getting out there and doing something else, and I appreciate it. Coach, this has been, I'm not just saying this has been a phenomenal conversation. I was expecting a lot from you, and I got more. I got more than what I expected. So I'm really excited about this episode and this conversation, and I can't thank you enough for jumping on. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for what you do for the sport, and I'm excited to continue to listen and learn and grow as a coach.
You bet, Coach. Thank you so much. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness, using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching. I can't tell you how many times I have conversations with coaches about things like this, and I want to bring out the fact that, and I know I'm an Illinois fan, and I'm from Illinois, but I always want to bring out the fact that I just don't appreciate the fandom and the honoring of the way Bobby Knight coached. And I don't have much of a leg to stand on because Bobby Knight was such a successful coach and got things done. And he really knew basketball and he got things done. But as I've gotten into this stuff, I just feel like it caused more harm probably than good. And I'm talking about from a mental aspect and what it did for players and individuals. And I think a lot of people were fine with that because you got so many wins. And again, I don't bring that up because who am I? What do I know? How am I going to bring it down? And you might say that my guest there, Greg Tonagel, is not Bobby Knight, but he's pretty successful. He's pretty good. He knows what he's talking about. And we didn't get into disparaging Bobby Knight too much, but the way he did it and all the disciples that he created, I think we are still cleaning up from that. And it has been pretty much proven that is just not the best way to coach. It can be successful. You can have some success, but it comes with a lot of consequences. And coaching out of fear and trying to get, I talked about it in the podcast, in the interview there, about getting kids into the fight or flight. I just don't think I don't think it's worth two things. It's not worth the consequences because even the individual that responds the way we want, there's still long-term damage and long-term trauma. And you can say it's not, but it is. But then also, I think that you can win the other way, and learning how to get players to play fearless gets them to reach their potential more than playing out of fear. It will always be that way. And I love that Coach Tonagel mentioned that was a biblical thing. I had no idea that Jesus talked that much about fear and about not being fearful. And I mean, I as I mentioned, I lean into the preachings of Paul because I love it. There's so much there with transformational, but it just there's so many ways that the Bible talks about us leaning into faith and hope and love and all these things that we should be. And then, there's a lot of coaches I know that are leaders and in faith that don't coach that way. I was one of them, right? I didn't used to do that. When I was coaching, I didn't do a good job of this. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive for us to think one thing or read one thing or go to Sunday and learn one thing and then coach another way. It doesn't make sense, and it's not biblical, and it's not what's best for the individual. And honestly, again, and I love so much that Greg is this example of this. You can win, and you can win a lot doing it this way. And I just love that he has these examples on not just theoretical, but how he does it on the way he does his film and the way he talks to players and the way he watches on, it's not X's and O's, it's the culture. And we don't have to change our defense or our sets. It's about them applying those sets and that defense in a fearless manner. In his stuff, in his conversation about the line, that's when I really started to geek out, because that is such a metaphorical thing. It's a very good way to get players to realize where they are, get out of their box and where they can be. That is something I do with individual players all the time. And to see that he's doing that with all his players, and having success, the amount of validation I feel after having this interview is really good. There's a lot of proof in what I'm doing, and it's happened whenever it's applied in the right way and in an all-in manner. And I'm so excited about this podcast and this interview, and hopefully you see that and you can do it. And I hope that this, if you're listening to this and you're a little bit fearful of kind of changing the way you coach because you're not sure if it's the best, or that's not how you were grown up coaching, or what you haven't done, and you're worried about what people think, I hope that this podcast and this interview can give you the courage to make some changes in the way you coach, knowing that it's what's best for the athlete. It's what can be best for your winning percentage. And as he mentioned in there, it can be what's best for you. I am the guy who leaned into my job. I was doing as an administrator at the time, leaning too much and too worried about what people thought and what the worries were, and really got into worry. And a lot of the issues that we have with mental health, I felt a lot of those and had a lot of issues. And I know that that's partly what led up to my stroke. And I can feel these things. And I'm so excited that there is a guy out here that I had a conversation to, that I have a connection to, that is doing it the right way, having success. And I just hope that it emboldens coaches to move forward and try this stuff. And yeah. And if you ever not sure how to do it, I'm not Greg Tonagel, but Greg Tonagel has his own job working with his own team and doing this stuff. But I've got a lot of experience in working with coaches to be able to change the way you coach and lean into this coaching from a place of positivity and fearlessness, and how to coach this way and how you can make that change. If you are struggling with this and don't know how to do it, reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about some of the programs that I do, how I do this. And this is something, this is my life's work now. I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm really excited about helping coaches out and do that. And yeah, if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about this interview. It was really cool. It's a good one. So if you like this, again, I hope it gives you the courage to move forward. But if you like it, if you like what's being said, don't keep it to yourself. Share it to somebody. Let somebody else hear it. A coaching friend, share it to them so they can see some of this stuff on kind of a different way to coach and a positive way to coach, and hear from somebody who's done it successfully. And I would love if you would do that. And as always, it helps me out, helps the show out, helps the idea out. Just so like, share, subscribe, doing all those things. I would really appreciate it. And I can't thank you enough for doing that. And I can't thank you enough for joining me and listening. But I'm out of time. So this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. And always remember to forge your metal. Thanks for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast. Don't forget to tune in every week for more insights and strategies to help you forge mental toughness and resilience. This podcast is brought to you by Mental Mettle Coaching, where we are driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that empowers others to play, live, and grow with confidence. Our mission is to instill a resilient and spirited mindset in our clients, enabling them to confidently face adversity and actively seek new challenges for personal growth. At Mental Mettle Coaching, we offer individual coaching, group coaching, and professional development for schools and businesses. Whether you're an athlete, educator, or professional, we're here to help you unlock your potential and thrive in every area of life. Until next time, keep growing, stay resilient, and always remember to forge your metal.